You may have been hearing about it for a while now, this whole real ID thing, and how if you don't already have your license or your ID replaced, you need to do so. And that deadline, it's just a matter of weeks away, really days away. So we are going to recap the details for you to make sure you know what you need to know. We're joined now live via Zoom by Justin Robach, the Ottawa County Clerk. He is here on Zoom. Justin, thanks so much for joining us to talk about this on Evening Plus.
Yeah, great to be with you. Thanks, Julia.
And so the Real ID, we've been hearing about it for years, but now it is happening. You need to have that Real ID if you don't already. What is the concept here? If you can just break down, why we are doing this, why this has to be, the way it is.
Yeah, and as you're saying, we have been hearing about it for years, right? It actually originally first came out of shortly after 9/11. The federal government passed these requirements, and really we've kind of been in a process where states have been pushing that deadline back, and the deadline has been pushed back, I should say, for states for some time now. But May 7 is coming up shortly, and it looks like that is going to be the kind of the cutoff for obviously focusing on anyone who's traveling domestically by air or visiting certain federal buildings. Certain federal requirements are going to require that Real ID.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is important. If you want to fly to visit someone, within the United States, as you mentioned, of course, the federal buildings as well, but flying is where this will really impact a lot of people. I know that I just replaced my license just in the last couple of months. And, without even knowing it, if you have renewed your license pretty recently, you likely already have that updated ID. But if someone is looking at theirs and they're curious, can you kind of just walk me through the details, on what exactly is needed and how that process works?
Yeah, you bet. It's actually pretty easy to tell if you have a Real ID because you should have a little star, a little gold colored star, in the upper right-hand corner of your ID. And in some of the newer IDs, it's kind of the shape of the state of Michigan, and some other ones it's just a circle with a star in the middle of it. So if you have a star on your state ID or your driver license, you should be good to go, and you do have a Real ID. And for those folks who do not, there's a couple of steps that they do need to take to provide some identifying documentation to obtain a Real ID. And that is definitely a process that is pretty easily handled at the Secretary of State's office, but you do need some documents. So basically, it's to establish legal presence in the U.S. So what the Secretary of State is going to be looking for is a birth record, a U.S. passport, or if you are a non-U.S. citizen who's here legally, the document requirements are a green card or other documentation of your proof of presence in the United States. So, for a whole lot of people, that looks like a birth certificate, right? And you can obtain that birth certificate from your county clerk's office, the county where you were born, as well as the state of Michigan. One thing I want to flag, though, for folks that affects a lot of people is if your name has changed in any way from the time you first received your birth certificate, you need to have proof of that legal name change. A lot of folks, that looks like a marriage license, right? Because marriage licenses allow folks to legally change their last name. For other folks, it's an adoption process or adoption proceeding where there needs to be some sort of documentation. Or maybe it's just a legal name change that you've gone to the court and said, I want to change my name. So that documentation also has to be present. And you can also obtain that from your county clerk's office, sometimes the probate court, if you have had a legal name change or an adoption. But those are the really fundamental documents that people need.
Yeah, I know when I went to get my license changed after I got married, my last name changed legally, so I had to bring in my marriage license exactly as you explained. And as far as, when we get to that May 7th deadline, that is the deadline that's in place, which is really just a matter of days away. If you don't do this by then, what's kind of the repercussions that you're going to face there if you are trying, federal building, flying? Ultimately, you just won't be able to do those things, really.
Yeah, I mean, really, if you have a domestic airline travel in your schedule coming up in the next couple of weeks, you really want to double check and make sure that you have that Real ID status, essentially. Now, obviously, if you have no immediate travel plans, there's no legal requirement that citizens have to obtain a Real ID. It's just a matter of that critical importance of air travel, as you said, is going to be the most common, but there are some other special instances basically where the federal government has said we're going to need and require individuals coming into these buildings to possess a real ID. So no consequences for not having one, other than the fact that if you're traveling by air, you really want to make sure that you get that taken care of as soon as you can.
And I do know, if for some reason you get into a pickle with getting this done, you can use a passport, but a passport, you don't want to mess around with losing that or anything. It's great to get that ID because everyone, typically carries that around. You will be able to use a passport, but ultimately, you're going to have your driver's license or your government ID on you anyway. So it really just is easier to kind of get everything situated.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those folks who don't have a passport, that's where I guess it comes in critically. And it's easier, quicker, I should say, to obtain a real ID than it would be a passport.
Sure.
So that's the convenience measure for anybody who does not have a U.S. passport. And I believe the requirements are, I'm not the expert at the federal level, but I believe it's a current non-expired U.S. passport that you have to have in lieu of the real ID. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And I can speak to that. I'm actually currently renewing my passport as well. And you're looking at least 4 to 6 weeks to do that via mail, if not even that's the expedited version. So you're looking at even longer than that if you don't want to kind of pay for that fee. It's not quick to replace a passport. The real ID would be a much quicker job to get done. I appreciate you walking us through this and why this is important. Again, that deadline is May 7th. Any other last minute details or reminders for folks on this topic?
Yeah, no, I think that pretty much covers it. And I think it's, again, not something immediately required unless you have those plans in the offing, but it's a convenient and pretty easy process once you have that documentation in place. Make sure you check out your county clerk's office or the state of Michigan if you need those vital records.
Absolutely. Ottawa County Clerk Justin Roebuck joining us tonight on Evening Plus. Justin, thank you so much for your time. We know you're a busy man. We appreciate your expertise on this topic.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Have a great rest of your night.